Let me tell you a story that sounds almost unbelievable. And strangely enough, the more unbelievable it sounds, the more likely it is to be real. Because history has a habit of surprising us, especially with the kind of irony that arrives just before dinner. So, here's what happened. One official, competent, respected, not particularly dramatic, woke up one morning to very good news. An imperial edict had arrived, a promotion, a solid one. The sort of promotion that makes your relatives suddenly stand a little straighter when speaking to you. He probably adjusted his robe a few extra times, maybe even allowed himself a quiet smile, because for the first time in a while, everything felt stable. And honestly, that reaction makes sense. In any system, ancient or modern, a promotion signals trust. It suggests safety. It implies momentum. At the very least, it hints that your day is heading in a good direction. But this story doesn't stay normal for long. In fact, it collapses out of normal before the sun even goes down. Because before evening arrived, before he'd even had time to enjoy the idea of his new responsibility, another imperial edict appeared at his door, and this one was not a celebration. It was an arrest order, a severe one. It stated, quite plainly, immediate detainment, interrogation, execution. Just like that. Morning honor, evening death. Now you might think, well, something enormous must have happened during the day. Some crisis, some revelation, some crime so serious the emperor had no choice but to act. But no, nothing new happened. Nothing changed between the morning and the evening except a piece of paper, because the charge against him was vague, suspiciously vague. It referred to an old case, one that had been mentioned years earlier, dismissed by the emperor, and then forgotten by everyone else. Until now. And you might wonder, why? Why would a forgotten case suddenly become deadly? Well, here's the part where the story becomes uncomfortably human. The trigger wasn't a confession. It wasn't new evidence. It wasn't even a secret investigation. It was a single memorial, written by a censor, a remonstrating official whose full-time job was to accuse people. Censors were the empire's watchdogs, or, depending on the weather and the emperor's mood, its attack dogs. One memorial could shift the atmosphere of the entire court, because in imperial politics, moods were more dangerous than laws. The emperor might have read the memorial, or skimmed it, or simply heard someone summarize it in 30 distracted seconds. But either way, the temperature in court changed, and when the emperor needed to appear decisive, someone had to fall. And that day, the unfortunate someone was the man who had been promoted that morning. It didn't matter that the old case had slept for years. It didn't matter that the emperor had previously ignored it. It didn't matter that the man had just been praised for his service. Visibility is dangerous. When your name is already on everyone's lips, you become the simplest answer to a complicated political moment. Now, if you've ever worked in a large organization, and let's be honest, nearly everyone has, you already know a version of this. Something goes wrong. Leadership needs a clear message, and the system picks a person. Not necessarily the guilty one, not necessarily the worst one, just the available one. That logic is ancient, and it is harsh. So the second edict didn't come with explanations, or hearings, or procedural steps. The order itself was the procedure. He was taken that same evening. The household that was celebrating that morning didn't even have time to put the leftover dishes away before soldiers arrived at the gate. Neighbors who had congratulated him hours earlier now avoided walking too close to his door. Because in that world, even proximity to a falling man could make you fall next. Inside the palace, people immediately began rewriting the narrative. That's one of the quieter rules of power. After the verdict, the story adjusts itself. Some said they always suspected something. Others nodded solemnly as if this outcome had been inevitable. The truth didn't matter anymore. The execution had created a new reality. In many dynasties, the emperor's mood was the axis around which careers spun. If he was tired, punishments were harsher. If he was irritated, executions came quicker. If he was pressured, someone paid the price. Imagine that. Your entire future depending on how rested your boss is. Even historians writing centuries later couldn't fully hide their discomfort. One chronicler used 2 words: honor vanishes. Another wrote, a moment of favor, a moment of ruin. Poetic, yes, but also painfully accurate. And here's the unsettling part. This wasn't a rare case. Versions of this story appear in multiple dynasties. Different emperors, different politics, same pattern. A sudden rise, a sudden accusation, a sudden reversal, a sudden execution. It was a feature of a system where rules mattered less than currents. Political, emotional, and sometimes completely arbitrary. That's what makes this story worth remembering. Not because it's dramatic, but because it shows how fragile status becomes when power has no counterweight. History doesn't record his final thoughts. We don't know whether he felt anger, shock, or simply resignation. But we do know the timing. The execution order reached him before the candles were lit for the night. The same courier route that brought celebration brought death. Morning, he bowed toward the palace in gratitude. Evening, he was led away in chains, a whole life, flipped over by politics, timing, and a single memorial. And the lesson is quiet, simple, and sharp. In a system where power is absolute, honor and death are not opposites. They are neighbors, sometimes separated by nothing more than a sheet of paper.